let me just make sure I have what I need. So I need this, I need this, I need this, and this. Okay, so we're good. So let me just kind of clean this up. So again, just to reiterate, when we're using the 8-inch box, you're gonna come across. You're always gonna cut across it. You're not gonna go into it because you want to be able to use the stretch that's built in this way, okay? So I take about 6 boxes usually for the wrist, depending on the size of the wrist, but most people, it's gonna be around 6 boxes of in width here. We are now jumping over to foam, okay? We used felt earlier today. We're gonna go to foam. Remember we used foam for the toes. Remember that, to make all the bumpers? So we're gonna make another bumper here, just a different length. So what I wanna do here is measure that my bumper fits within my tape here. So then I can measure these together, and then now those are ready. Okay, if I'm doing a TFCC tape, likely this person's going into play. Okay, otherwise I would do a carpal wrap or something easier, like a carpal wrap to send them home, or a Coban wrap if it's more of an acute injury to get them home to ice. If this is going on, the unloads usually are that they're gonna go play. So what we're gonna do, typically I'll have somebody sitting for this with their arm resting like so, because holding your arm like this is gonna get tiring. But for the demo, do this. Yep. So what we wanna do here is first, actually, I'm just gonna have you here for a sec. Open your fingers. Good. I'm gonna make sure I wrap her wrist properly. And then you can kind of come up. Just check where you're taping, because what you don't want to do here is go into her hand, okay? You don't want to be covering her hand. You want to go just to the distal row of the carpals and cover that. So that might just take you a quick sec to like check where you are, okay? Then she can be in position just like this. Now, what we need to do, remember how to find the TFCC? It's in where? The ulnar fovea, right? So it's right in this little space. So generally, if there's a TFCC tear or irritation, that's going to be tender. This is also going to be painful when they go, because they're pinching it, okay? So we're gonna keep them in neutral. We're gonna think about that ulnar fovea, and we're gonna create bumpers. Do you guys ever bowl with bumpers on the sides or see it?
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. We're making the gutter, okay? Now, technically, we published this article. I'll post it so you guys can download it, but we published this in one of the tennis medicine journals. And when we did it, there's one step I sometimes skip. So we're now in 3s because we're working with a very small space here. We do not need to be working in halves. Okay. So technically, there's a step. Before you put down strips, what do you always have to do? You have to anchor it, right? So technically, made it too long. In the article that we published, we said you have to have an anchor. So on either side of the gutter, there's now an anchor to anchor your strips down. Technically, this is tape. Technically, that could act as an anchor. But when we published it, we said, let's just be really clear on all the steps. And then sometimes I'll skip that step because I know I've got my cover roll under there. But for the purposes of the demo, I'm doing it just as we did it for the publication, okay? So that if you were to show anybody this or teach them, this is not getting lost in the translation, okay? So now we're gonna do it just as we've done it. Pinch, pull around. Pinch, pull around. Now, the one thing that I'll sometimes see with new tapers doing this particular tape is they make these too short because they see like, oh, this is not a very big distance, but actually you have to get on the other side of that. So it is really better to err a little longer because like who cares if that goes a little bit beyond the anchor? It's gonna get covered and no one's gonna know. Okay, so now again we're creating this gutter where the TFCC is going to be. And then what we're also doing is we're going to create a blocking to that ulnar deviation. So as I come up high, I'm going to probably do one more, and then I'm going to be in her hand, which is not where I want to be. She probably already feels like her motion is limited, and that's what I want. I don't want her to be able to go so far that she causes the pinch. So we're gonna block it. But if she told me, I still feel it a little bit, I would say, no problem. We're gonna add one extra block. But first, I have to re-anchor those pieces. So I'm gonna anchor all of those. Now this is another step that sometimes some of my colleagues on the tour, they will skip because they're like, I'm gonna anchor it down with Liplast, so it's not gonna go anywhere. So we've argued that, but for the purpose of teaching another, anybody, we're trying to be pure to what we published, okay? So now, I'm going to do a blocking. So, if she told me like, oh, I still feel it a little, we're going to create a block. Push into me, push. Okay, now do that. Does that feel better? Like it's more stable now, right? If she also had pain going into extension of her wrist, which is typical, it's like usually this and this, a combined motion that pinches the TFCC, I could do a block from the top and say, I'm not going to let you go there. Push up, I push down. So now she should feel limited in this range and this range. She's still going to have full function of her wrist to play her sport. We're just going to block the end ranges. This is an option. This is an option. The base is the underlying gutter unload. But if we think we need a little extra block, and sometimes all you need is just one extra block this way. The issue here comes in if they have a central slip lesion. The central portion of the TFCC will cause pain more here, not as much here. Or sometimes it's here and here. So that's where you have to really listen to the athlete and be like, when does this hurt you? You know, is it as you're kind of coming through? Is it on your backhand as you're coming through? And if it is, then I'm gonna block this from happening. If there's no issue on their forehand, then I don't need to worry about the extension component, okay? But if you know they've got more pain centrally versus here, that might cue you in to do an extensor block. Once we're done with the blocks, and you can come up here. Actually you can, okay, you can be here actually, we're done. So you see how I went all the way around with her coverall? You don't need pre-wrap now because she has no real skin exposed here. So I'm just going to, fingers into me, come around. Try to capture not her hand. Do you see how I hold it down and pull? I think maybe one more here, finish at the top. And then I also still like to have them, if they're using sweatbands, to put one on now, because now everything is secure, nothing is gonna come off, and then it just keeps it secure under there. Okay, so now this is our gutter unload. So you've got regular unload, buckle unload, gutter unload, all with different little components to it. You're gonna create the gutter. So we put coverall, our gutter is now in foam, we're back to foam. You anchor, you do your strips, you re-anchor, you decide do you need a block or a block, and then you finish with your light plast, and they're done. Okay, so this is like the ultimate widget because it really secures them. But you're not always going to be there, and this is not a tape they can do on their own. So that's when you want to opt for maybe some bracing techniques. Okay? Good. So you're going to break off and